Hey Bill, thank you again for talking to us today. My first question for you is, would you be able to quick tell us about your parents and when and where were you born?
Sure. I would be glad to do that. My mother and dad grew up on a farm in Dakota County in St. Paul. My grandfather, Linton, was a railway mail sorter, and he was on the mail. He was on the road of the mail he rode on the mail car from St. Paul to Hastings. All mail was sorted on the train and delivered mechanically from the rail car. There was an arm that stuck out, and the mail was hanging on that, and as the train would go by, the mail would slide off, and then a few feet further on, there was another one of these, and they put the mail for that area there, and so that would fall off. And so he was busy sorting mail all the time that he was traveling. And well, I told you that, yeah. And then you wanted to know about my parents.
Yes.
And my dad and mother grew up in Minneapolis, in St. Paul area. They first met and were married in St. Paul. And rode the streetcar from Inver Grove to 1.5 miles from the streetcar that traveled between St. Paul and Hastings. My grandfather sorted mail. I had that he had for each town. And as I said, there was a telephone pole there that picked off the mail, and then the next one put it back on. My mother was always a housewife, and as I said, they were married in St. Paul Park. And Dad lived on the farm down in Dakota County, and at that particular time, there was a streetcar that ran from Hastings up to St. Paul, and it was like every couple of hours or something. So if you wanted to go somewhere, you just waited until the streetcar came along, and if you were standing there, they would stop and pick you up, so just like we do now.
You told me on the day that they were married, your dad, Grandpa put the bread, or got the bread going, then he went out to St. Paul to get married. Maybe you want to tell that story.
I think I forgot that. I didn't write.
Well, you don't have to write it down,
Yeah.
but you can just say that.
But anyway, this is true. The day that my mother and dad got married, Dad walked up about a half a mile or a quarter of a mile up to where he could catch the streetcar. And nowadays, of course, it's all bus route, but in these days it was rail. And so anyway, when somebody was standing there, then the engineer knew that he was somebody that wanted to ride, and so he would stop, pick them up, and then they'd take off again. And let's see. Next question.
Well, I was wondering, what were your mom and dad's first names?
My dad's name was William,
Okay.
and I was named after him. I was the last of 4 boys. My 3 brothers were all born with the assistance of a midwife, and so they were at home. I was the only one that was born in a hospital in Hastings, and so that set me apart a little bit different from the others, because Mother was in the hospital when I was born.
And your mom's name was?
Harriet.
Harriet. And you were born in Hastings?
Pardon?
You were born in Hastings?
Yes.
Okay.
I was the only one that was, like I say, the only one that was born in the hospital.
Right. Would you be able to please tell me what your earliest memory is of?
One of the earliest memories I have was as a kid, the one-room schoolhouse that I lived in was basically 3/4 of a mile from the house. And I got into the business of trapping pocket gophers because the county paid a nickel for each pocket gopher. Now, one of the reasons that they were trying to get rid of the pocket gophers was that they had this mound that was maybe 6 or 7 inches high, and when the farmer wanted to cut the hay or grass or anything, a lot of times these little rocks would get stuck in between the sickle and the rest of and then they'd have to get off of that and get rid of that rock before they could go on further. So I well, here's a chance for me to make some money. And so I had a wagon every day when I would go to school. I would leave about, school started at like 9 o'clock or something like that. And I would leave the house about 5:30 with my wagon and all the paraphernalia that I needed for digging up this, putting a trap to catch these pocket gophers. And like I said, I got paid 5 cents for pocket gophers and 3 cents for striped gophers. And one day because I would keep these pocket gopher front feet in this can with lime on it so they didn't spoil. And one day I went to cash in my pocket gophers, and the fella came out, he shakes it out on the ground like this, and starts counting them. He says, "Bill, you're short 1 foot here." And I said, "Yes, sir." That pocket gopher had been caught once before, and had evidently chewed his leg off so he could get out of the trap. And I can clearly remember this. He says, "I don't believe what you're telling me." He says, "I think you're trying to cheat me or the county." And so he said, and of course, here I am, a 5-year-old kid, and I started crying because I thought he was accusing me, because he was accusing me of this. So I went home, I walked home, and I walked in the house, and tears were streaming down my eyes, and my dad says, "Bill, what happened? Did you get hurt or something?" And so I told him what had happened. And he says, "Come on, get in a truck with me." He said, "We're going back up there." So he drove me up to the store, and I could clearly remember my dad grabbing him by the necktie and said, "What's this I hear about you cheating my son?" He says, "My son wouldn't do anything like that." And this, okay, I'll pay him," he says. And he did pay him. So that was quite an experience for me.
And I can see how after all these years later, how that memory would just really stick in your mind, because I'm sure it was a very traumatic memory.
Yeah.
So you did mention where you went to grammar school. Where did you attend high school?
I was the only one of my brothers and sisters. Where we lived, we were supposed to take the bus and go over to Rosemount. And I didn't want to ride the bus all day. And so I talked to my parents, and I said, and my dad asked me, "Well, where would you like to go?" And I said, "I would like to go to South St. Paul." And he said, "Well, that seems reasonable." So he says, "I'll take you up every day." And then so you have a ride. Well, then just a couple of years after that, let's see, it was high school age. You could take a driver's license test, and then you were able to drive. There were one other boy and a girl, and the three of us went to South St. Paul, and that's where I graduated from.
Did you attend college?
Yes. When I got out of the military, I had points enough that I could go to college, and so I decided that I would go to college, and the closest college was South St. Paul again, so that's where I went to college.
But Dad, you went to the university for like 30 years, night school, because you graduated after I graduated.
Yeah.
So if you want to tell.
Okay. So you attended the University of Minnesota?
Yes.
Okay.
A lot of it was correspondence school.
Okay. What years were you in the military?
Let's see. See if I wrote that down. Just.
I think it was like 1946 to 48 or something like that. It was after your brothers got out, right?
No.
So it would have been
'Cause-
shortly
Well,
after.
well, my other brothers all went to the School of Agriculture, and I didn't want to. I wasn't planning on being a farmer. I thought I could do better, and so I started out first correspondence school until I had an opportunity to get into the school, because there was only a certain number that they were taking at that time. And so then I went ahead and I graduated. Shortly after I graduated was when World War II started. And my oldest brother, Harry, was a truck driver, and he was the first truck to land on Normandy Beach after the tanks had driven the Germans back. And he was carrying supplies, so he was up on this kind of a platform where a city was, but there weren't any other people there. And so he just sat there and waited until after the tanks had pushed the Germans back, and then he followed them along, carrying the ammunition for them and everything.
Okay. How did you meet your wife, Hazel, and how many years were you married?
I met Hazel at a party, and I thought she was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And we hit it off right away. And so then I started officially courting her, you might say. And we had many, I grew up in Logan Parkway, and Hazel could just get acquainted with people just like that. I mean, she just had a skill of meeting people and getting to know them. And they used to play 500, and they would play this game. There was a group of them. They'd go from house to house. Each house would take them. And so that was just a fun time that we all just got together.
Yeah, that's right, because she was born and raised in Fridley.
Yes.
Yeah. And when did she pass away?
Oh. Let's see if I have that.
2017.
I don't think
2017.
What was it?
2017.
2017.
Okay, so Hazel passed away in 2017. Sounds like she had a very good long life, and you had many happy years together.
And also another fact here is that because I had been in the military, we were able to be buried in Fort Snelling Cemetery. So Hazel was the first one from my family that was buried there. And David, or one of the kids, always takes me down to put flowers on the grave. So I get a chance to talk to her, you might say.
That's really nice to hear that you're able to do that. That's very sweet. How many children do you have, and what are their names?
Well, David is the oldest. Then I have two daughters, Jeannie, who is married and lives up. David, where is that today?
Hayward.
Pardon?
Near Hayward, Wisconsin. Near Hayward, Wisconsin.
Hayward, Wisconsin. Thank you. And a little bit about them.
Who's your other daughter?
Pardon?
Lori.
No, there's Lori too. She had cancer in her ankle when she was young. And so they those days, the treatment was really rugged. She had this cancer in her ankle, and to prevent it from getting into her whole body, they took her knee off, just about right here. So she has a stub and a socket and an artificial leg that moves by itself, but she has to pick it up and swing it around. So it's a lot of work for her, but it works. And nowadays, I don't think they go to such extremes. I don't know, but anyway, that was pretty extreme. And I remember my mother, or my Hazel, really crying about the fact that Lori had to lose her leg. But she's learned to live with it, and other than the way that she walks, you'd never know that anything was wrong.
So you mentioned that Hazel grew up in Fridley. When did you move to Fridley, and where in Fridley did you live when you first came here?
Look and see. Lord, how did I meet Hazel? That was one of the questions. Did I?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, you told us that.
Where are the couple places that you've lived here in Fridley, Pops?
Pardon?
Where have you lived in Fridley?
The first place that I lived in Fridley was behind Hazel's mother had a second house that was just back by the railroad tracks from the house on Logan Parkway, or I mean on East River Road. We had, Hazel belonged to a card club that they played cards every month. And there was the people that, the person that owned my house, let's see, I have to stop to think what he was. Dewberries. And they came from Wisconsin. And his business was after World War II, any person that was in the military had points that they could go to school with, and a lot of them, they were working, and so they would choose to go by just submitting questions, answers to questions, things like that. The wives all would get together and they would play cards and talk and, have lunch or something like that. And one night when it was right about 4th of July or something like that, when you used to be able to have firecrackers and stuff like that. Anyway, they were playing in this one house. They were all playing, the women were all playing their cards. And somebody in the area had shot up a rocket. And by this time, fireworks were a no-no as far as the government was concerned. So here comes a police car knocking on the door. And they asked him, they said, "Did you hear any fireworks?" And I remember the person that lived there said, "No, we were down in the basement playing cards and we didn't hear anything." This police officer accused him of lying. And so he was going to take them into, because fireworks were not, you couldn't use them. He was figured on taking them up to Anoka to put them in a jail until after they could have a hearing and go through this. Well, he was able to, or we, all of us, were able to explain that, no, we were down in the basement playing cards. We didn't have anything to do with the fireworks. So they said, well, okay, we'll let you go this time, but I don't want to catch you again.
What were your first impressions of Fridley when you first came here? It would have been very rural back in those days still, I would imagine. I think it might be right here, maybe.
When I moved to Fridley, it was 1934, 35.
Okay.
Well, what was Fridley like when you moved here, though?
It was very rural. There was, at that particular time, when I first lived here, there was a bus service. And you got on the bus when it'd be going up the road. And it went from Fridley up to, let's see, all the way up to North Dakota. And I can't remember for sure what the town was, but anyway, the Great Northern Railroad uses the exact same route to get up to North Dakota, and was established, actually, it was actually established back in the days when the ox carts would carry people and mail and anything else along this route that would right into Fridley. And the Great Northern Railroad uses that exact same route to get up. over to North Dakota.
That's-
So that's how these rail lines, and how the traffic goes.
That's very interesting. Well, I know that the Banfield Tavern at Monoman Park was like a hotel inn where it was like a 1 day's travel from, Fridley at the time was a day's travel to Minneapolis.
Yeah. I don't think that was one of the questions.
No, I just was mentioning it.
No, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah. I do have a follow-up of Fridley when you would have been quite young. Let's say I was just walking around Fridley, maybe along Mississippi Street or maybe along East River Road, and let's say it's 1939. Would have there been electricity? Did most of the homes in Fridley have electricity in the late 1930s?
Kerosene lamps.
Kerosene lamps?
Yeah.
When would you say electricity came to Fridley, like overall? When did the majority of Fridleyites have electricity?
I can't remember the exact year, but it was when they first, let's see, I'm trying to think what they call these towers that they use. They use radium or something like that. They used to power them. And I remember everybody was really scared about that because they said, well, what if one of those exploded or something? Is it going to spread all this? Are we going to have this stuff scattered all over us and will we get sick and things like that? We were really worried about when they first had these, about what would it, and how did they move that material after a while to no longer generate power, and what are they going to do with it? Well, we've since found out that what they did was they had these huge casks, and it was insulated with asbestos or some material that would absorb all these radons, and then they transported them up. Let's see what town it is. Anyway, there's caves in there, and they put these casks in these caves, and then they seal them all up so that this radon won't come out or anything.
Would you be able to tell me a couple of the stores or businesses that you shopped at when you were young in Fridley?
Well, the closest main store that we had was in Coates, and that was a small town that was like 6 miles from where we lived. And so when Mother wanted to go shopping, my Dad would get the truck out, and because that's all we had, didn't have a car, and so Mother would ride in front with Dad, and us kids all sat in the back, up against the back of the cab, and if it was winter time, where we just had a couple of blankets to keep us warm. But we were awful happy when we got a car. So.
How about like in Fridley? Did you shop at like the National Tea or Thielen Meat Market?
Bob's Produce.
Bob's Produce, yeah.
Bob's Produce. You could buy anything there.
And that would have been back when he was on East River Road,
Right.
off of Mississippi Street.
At one time, this was, I don't remember what age I was, but it was after our family and everything. And we Hazel and I had gone to buy some groceries or something at Bob's. And Bob came out and he says, "Bill," he said, "I got a job for you." And I said, "Oh, what's that?" He said, "I've got a wire brush," and he says, "I've got some paint." The first, he said, "Here's what I want you to do." He said, "I want you to take," because these fire hydrants were all getting rusty and they didn't look nice. And Bob was very particular about things, and so he said, "Well, here's what I want you to do, Bill." He said, "I want you to take this wire brush," and he said, "you go out to all the fire hydrants up and down East River Road," and he says, "you scrub the rust off, and then you put this yellow paint on it, and let that harden, and then," he says, "the next day you come back and you paint them regular color so that the fire department can find them when the snow has been plowed up on the side of the road and everything, because they can put this paddle up that sticks up above the snowbank, and so they can, that's how they, and they, that was how at that time that they could locate the fire hydrant to put a fire out.
That's very interesting. Were you active in any Fridley civic organizations?
Let me see.
You worked with the Boy Scouts a long time.
Pardon?
You worked with the Boy Scouts a long time. Boy Scouts,
Yeah.
and you were on the Fridley Safety Board at one time.
When David was in the Boy Scouts, why, they used to go up to summer camp in order to earn merit badges to get to the next rank. And the first week that this one particular year, I went up as I had some vacation, and so I said, well, I'm going to take 2 weeks vacation and go up with them and help their to earn merit badges. And I can't remember what town that was, but anyway, after every night, they for entertainment, all these boys would put together little skits. You know, they just wrote up whatever came to their mind, I guess. Well, they were hilarious. And so then, after I had to go back to work again because I used up all my vacation, when I would come home from work, I would pick up Hazel and we'd drive up there just to watch, just because it was so entertaining watching all these skits that they put together. And of course, then had to come home afterwards. It was usually midnight by the time we got home. And then I had to be up at 5 o'clock to go to work at Northern Ordnance. And come home and grab Hazel and we'd drive back up many, many miles, but it was really worth it.
And where was the camp located?
Yeah, it was at Mini Point.
Okay. That sounds like a really good memory. What does Fridley as a community mean to you? Or if you could describe Fridley maybe in a couple of words.
It's just a great place to live. When I was living in Logan Parkway was when Hazel passed away. And originally when this building was being built, they surveyed all the people and asked them if they would be interested in living there. They were trying to figure out how many people there might be. And I didn't want to leave, neither Hazel nor I wanted to leave Fridley, because that was where we lived all the time. And so we put our name in here. Well, in the meantime, before we moved into here, was when Hazel had lung problems and she passed away. And then I did not want to live at Logan Parkway, and just because of all the memories and everything. And so I moved over here. I was basically the second person to move into Fridley. In fact, we had taken the family on a Caribbean cruise, and this was the cruise that I called the cruise from hell, because that was when COVID was really rampaging. And I caught COVID, and so did a lot of other people. So they quarantined the ship, and they could no longer pull into any port, and people couldn't go shopping and like we normally do when you go on one of these cruises. And so we were just tied up there. And they refunded us all the money that we had paid for the cruise, but I don't know. David, I think, is working on something to maybe where we could go as a family on it.
Again.
But
I do have a quick follow-up question on Hazel. She was a substitute teacher, correct?
She started out as a substitute teacher because for the school system had all the teachers that they wanted or needed. And so she worked as a substitute teacher. She was working with handicapped children that had handicaps of some sort. And she just actually loved these kids, and they loved her back. Now, one night we were at a basketball game, and our good friends Dick and Evelyn Beats, who Evelyn taught school with Hazel, and we did everything together, the four of us. In fact, we used to go up to not Perkins, it's
Panera.
pardon?
Panera.
Panaras, that was it. The four of us. And we basically solved all the problems of the world. Then, shortly after that, I had a stroke, and I actually, I had a hard time getting around and everything. Well, I was given treatments for that, and it worked out, got to be pretty good. Then they said, I can remember David had taken me to the doctor, and the doctor said, well, Bill, would you like to drive again? And I said, you know, I really don't want to drive again. I said, people drive so crazily, my reaction time would be bad. And I was actually worried that I would hit somebody and maybe kill them. And that was so strong on my mind that I said, I don't want to drive anymore. And I said, David needed a car at that time, so I gave him my car. And if I went anywhere, I would walk. I had my cane. I've used this cane ever since. I don't know how many canes I've worn now.
I would like to ask you just a few questions about your professional career. When did you start working at FMC, also known as Northern Pump, and how many years did you work there?
Let's see if I've got that. I started at Northern Pump. Hazel's mother was a matron at FMC. She took care of the women's bathrooms, and then at noon they had a lunchroom, and she would help work at the lunchroom. And I started working at United Defense first because I had decided that I didn't want to be a farmer, that I would rather work in the city. And so I had this opportunity to, when I was going to South St. Paul, I took up drafting. It was one of the classes that I took up. And then so it was natural for me when I started working at United Defense, because I was the only one that was working there that had any experience with making drawings and things like that. I was sent to a class where I could learn all of the rules that the military, that the government had for duplicating parts to be manufactured. All the radiuses for the weldments and pieces that they put together to, they would weld up this piece, and then it went to the machine shop to be machined. And because I was the only one at that particular time that had any knowledge about drawings and stuff like that, J.B. Hawley, who was the owner of Northern Defense, Northern Ordnance, set up a classroom where it was down on Central Avenue. And my job was, I had about 5 or 6 people who knew how to make drawings and stuff like that. And they would duplicate the drawings, and I had to, and it was, they had to be made to government specifications, and like for radius and for everything, all the dimensions had to be there so that anybody, any manufacturing company could be able to make the parts. And my job, I had there were like maybe 25 or 30 people that were working for me over on Central Avenue in this building. And then we had to submit them to the government so the government would approve them. And then they became the official. They could send it out to any manufacturing company and they could make the parts. Well, that particular rapid fire 35 millimeter gun this roll, this rotates around, and there's a deal inside here that will raise this up into here and shove it into the gun, and then they can fire it. This particular gun had 75 rounds a minute. It's 35 millimeter. It's about that big around. This part, this is powder can, and when this thing rotates around, the empty ones are kicked off, and they just, at this particular time, they just chatter out into the outer side deck around the ship. And eventually, most of them just roll off and fall into the sea and disappear. But if they don't, then they can melt all this copper down. They can make new ones for it. And it's amazing how fast this gun
Yes,
fires.
I can imagine. Would you like me to take that from you?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel. It's my understanding that you worked on the Mark 75.
Yes.
Would you be able to quick tell us about that, please?
Jeannie is an accountant, and she was working for a sauerkraut company, doing their bookwork and stuff. And I'm trying to think what the name of the town, I can't think of it right now, but anyway, the mayor of the town was Captain Beggs, the retired Navy guy. And Hazel has always had the ability, she could meet somebody, another woman or something, and they just clicked, and she was able to find out all the history. Just walking around, I mean, they would go for a walk or something, and she could just, they just, these other ladies, they gravitated towards her. So one day I get a phone call from this Captain Beggs, and he was the mayor of this town, and he says, "Bill, I got a job for you." And yes, sir. What is it that you want? He said, "I want you and Hazel to go to Izmir, Ethiopia, to the NATO meeting." And so I was probably one of the first civilians to ever represent the U.S. government at these NATO meetings where they discussed all their plans for years to come.
About how many NATO conferences did you attend?
Probably about 6. And then I retired.
That's very interesting. About what year did you retire from FMC?
What did I do?
Or what year did you retire?
You know, I don't know if I wrote that down.
How many years did you work there, Pops?
45 years. I do have it here. After I was discharged from the Navy, and I don't have the exact year that I retired.
Sounds good. Well, it sounds like
I've never retired.
no, you're still working.
I basically, we have some exercise equipment downstairs here, and I go down every day and I put in an hour working out. I have one particular machine that I use. I use my feet and my hands.
That's great.
And I put in an hour a day working out there.
Well, it sounds like you had a very distinguished and long career at FMC, 45 years. Do you have maybe a quick memorable story from your time working there that you would like to share with us?
One of the memorable years that I have was when I retired from United Defense. One of the fellows that worked for me started a company called the Sign of the Eagle. It's over in Excelsior. Excelsior is a very, very expensive area. A lot of rich people live in Excelsior. They all wanted, or they would come to the Sign of the Eagle, and they would say, we have this such and such, and we'd like to have another one made just like it, for whatever reason. And so my friend would call me up and he'd say, I got a job for you, here's what I would like to make. There were two of us that made different things when they wanted. The other fella could make cabinets and stuff like that, but he couldn't make real fancy stuff. And so I got all the fancy stuff. I'd spend hours down in the basement of my house. I had basically a complete machine shop there. When I had retired from FMC, they always gave us a retirement party, and they would collect money. Everybody, would put some money in a piggy bank or something. Well, what I received from them was maybe $400 or $500. So I'm thinking about, what am I going to do? I don't want to. I want to keep active, and so I bought some machines and I put them down in the basement of our house at Logan Parkway. And Hazel was substitute teaching over at Columbia Heights at that time. And they if there was, when they had some job that our teacher would say, I want to be gone this day or something like that, they used a system called the jobulator, and I think that's still in existence. I think that I think Ted uses that once in a while when he gets my son-in-law, so anyway, I was working down the machine shop and I had my computer down there set for jobulator, and a job would come up and I'd go ding, 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 you know. I'd run over quickly and I'd look to see what the job was, and if it was a job that I thought Hazel would be interested in, why I would just click it and she had the job. And I used to tell her that I'm just trying to keep you employed so you won't be bored, because she did get bored very easily, and when she got bored, she got irritated. To me anyway, that was the way that I looked at it. And so I would tell her, well honey, I'm just keeping you employed. And I think that jobulator system is still in use, but it sure came in handy.
That's good. Well, Bill, those are all the questions that I have for you today. I want to thank you very much for taking the time out of your Saturday to chat with the Fridley Historical Society. We appreciate your time, and all of us at the Fridley Historical Society want to wish you an early happy birthday.
Well, thank you. And thank you for interviewing me.
You're very welcome.
It was a pleasure.
Yes, and if you'd ever like to talk to us again, we'd be happy to.